Hi, my name is Arkila Covington. I am a marriage and family therapist in the states of California and in Missouri. Today, I am joined by my mother, Stephanie Covington. You can call her Miss Stephanie or Miss Covington. You want to say something?
Good morning.
All right. So today we're going to talk about the effects of a child's behavior when a parent is addicted to substance. So we're gonna start off with the first part of it. I will go over some background information. What is a substance? What are some of the examples? And then we'll do a Q&A. So it'll still be within an hour's framework. So we're going to get started. All right. So what is a substance? Most people look at substance as just being addicted to a street drug, whether it's an opiate, a stimulant, a depressant. That can be alcohol, crack, cocaine, meth, fentanyl. But there's another level to addiction, and that's prescription drugs as well. And so we don't want to leave that out. So as I go through this segment, I want you guys to keep in mind that I am also talking about prescription drugs. Okay, so how do you know if a person is addicted? And so right now, I'm solely talking to an individual that has had a child or birthed a child or even adopted a child, and you are addicted to a substance. If you consistently use alcohol or other mood-altering drugs until you're high, intoxicated, or passed out, then chances are you're addicted to a drug. And we also have to look at the frequency and the duration. If you say, oh, well, I'm a social drinker, or I smoke marijuana or crack only when I'm hanging out with my family for the weekend, or only during holidays, or, if you're saying that, I'm not really looking at that, because there are individuals that will smoke marijuana or drink alcohol only on social occasions. We're talking about the individuals that drink it on a consistent basis, and the frequency and duration of how much they drink increases over the day, week, months, and years. If you're unable to stop or cut down, there are a lot of individuals that say, oh yeah, I can stop if I want to stop, but they're unable to, because they're addicted to the substance. They're dependent on the substance. They have a need for the substance. If you deny that you are addicted to a substance, you're like, oh no, I'm a functional drinker, or I'm a functional smoker, I'm a functional meth user. I'm not really addicted. I just do this for fun. This is a party drug. So I'm not really an addict because I only do this for fun. That's another key point you want to really start looking at if you're saying this to individuals. If your family members or friends, employers, people on the street that don't know you, if they see you out on the streets, or they see you anywhere, and they're saying you're addicted to the substance, or you have a problem with drugs, chances are you have a problem with drugs or alcohol. If you are missing special social events because you have to fix yourself up or get yourself in the mood, you're probably addicted in one of those social obligations. A lot of times you're missing a kid's parent-teacher conference, you're missing a kid's sporting event, you're missing your child's any type of award ceremony, you're missing that. And those are considered important social events, but you're unable to attend them because you have a need to go and use the substance that you depend on. So those are just some of the key hints to let you know that you're addicted to a substance. Now, if you are raising a child that has a parent that's addicted to a substance, I want to talk to you as well. But first, I want to address some of the long-term goals. Some of the long-term goals of a parent that's addicted to a substance is sobriety. Sobriety is always the first goal. Sobriety is attained in a number of different ways. Some individuals use programs. Programs don't work for everyone. Everyone can go to a program and say, yes, this worked for me. Other people just one day miraculously end up stopping. So, an important event happens in their life. They realize that the drug is doing damage to their family and friends and children. And so they just decide to stop. Other people develop a relationship with God, and that's how they stop using. So I'm not saying that there's one way over another to stop using the substance. What I'm saying is the ultimate goal is sobriety. The second goal is similar to the first goal, and it's maintain sobriety. You want to maintain a level of sobriety once you're off. And that means protecting your space, protecting your life, and protecting your mindset. So you don't want to hang out with the same friends that you were hanging out with. You don't want to hang out in the same places that you were hanging out in. You don't want to have the same setup in your home or in your office space or in your car. If you would hide alcohol in your desk to say, oh, I need to pick me up because I had a hard day, and by noon you're drunk and everyone at work knows it, or if you keep marijuana stashed away in your dresser drawer and you say your kids are giving you a hard time and you go and smoke because you had a hard day, your kids are giving you a headache, take all of that stuff away. You have to set up barriers in your life so that you cannot go back to doing what you were doing when you start to feel the same emotions that you used to feel. So some of the diagnoses that's attributed to someone that uses a substance, it could be whatever your drug of choice is. For example, if it's cocaine, it can be cocaine use disorder, moderate, severe, or cocaine substance use disorder, mild. The same thing for cannabis. Cannabis, AKA weed, THC, hash, so it can be cannabis use disorder, cannabis use disorder, moderate or severe, cannabis use disorder, mild. If it's alcohol use or severe, alcohol use disorder, mild. Some people know it by the term polysubstance. So if you use more than one substance, for instance, most individuals get high off of heroin, fentanyl, and marijuana. In the past, or if you've had a diagnosis before, it would have said polysubstance. But that doesn't really give us an idea of what substance you're using and the frequency and duration. Adding mild, moderate, or severe helps give us a starting point of where you are. And it also puts it dead back in your face how much you're doing it. You can't say you don't smoke that much or use drugs that much because you do it 7 days a week. If you're doing it 5 days a week and you're spending I'm gonna go on the low end. If you're spending $20 to $200 a week on drugs, you really have to evaluate if you have a problem or not. So that's where I'm going with individuals to see if you have a substance. The next thing I'm going to go over is parents, guardians, teachers, professional workers, mental health workers. If you have any of relationship with a child whose parents may be addicted to a substance, there are some things that you have to be aware of. First, if you're raising a child and they live in your household and their parent is addicted to a substance, you have to know, first and foremost, that child wants to be with their mother. It does not matter how good you are to their parent, to the child. You have to realize that they want to be with their parent, and there is nothing wrong with that. Please don't make them feel ashamed or embarrassed by wanting to be with their parent. Don't make them feel belittled or stupid because they would choose to be with someone who chooses to use a substance over taking the responsibility of parenting them. So you have to be aware of that. Teachers, mental health providers, professionals, clergy workers, if you are in contact with a child that has a parent that is addicted to a substance, you have to realize that there are certain things that happens in the house. First off, if they do live with their parents, you have to realize that there is a level of parentification that goes on. That means the child typically takes care of the household. The child takes care of the cleaning up. The child takes care of the cooking. The child takes care of making sure the other siblings are up and ready to go to school. And the child is responsible for maintaining an image that everything is going okay in the home. Because that child knows that if someone finds out that their parent is on a substance, there's a strong chance that they may be taken away for neglect. Neglect often happens in households where a parent is addicted to a substance. So please be aware of that and don't make the child feel ashamed. So the other thing that happens in a household where a parent is living addicted to a substance, if the child is still living with their parent, is there is a lot of lack of sleep. If your parent is coming in the house at different times of the night, bringing individuals into the home, or having someone come over to sell, use with, if they're using drugs in the house, which oftentimes happens, you have to realize that that child may have contact high. So their behavior may be different from other kids. And one of the things I do when I'm working with a child who is born drug addicted, I have them go to a neurologist, do a neuro exam, because my theory is different drugs affect the body in different ways. And if you're using that drug while you're pregnant, you are going to affect that baby. And so if you're using marijuana, your baby is going to be really different than if you're using alcohol. There are just different symptoms. If you're smoking crack and you birth a baby versus you smoking meth, there are some different ways that behavior shows up in the child when you're doing either drug. So I think it's really important to always ask for a neuro exam. Whenever I have an adopted child or a foster child, those are some of the things I ask about their parents' drug history, because I want to know, not for the sake of knowing, but for the sake of how can I help and provide support to this child. If the child is not living in a household with their parent and they're living with a relative or a foster parent, you have to realize that that child still has to protect the other children. And I don't know, I can't say whether it's the oldest child, the middle child, or the youngest child, because it affects the child in different ways. But there are some children that will take on that responsibility of making sure all the other siblings are okay. Even if they're in a different household, you have to also realize that if they're being raised in a household by a family or foster parents, there's a lot of different treatments in the home. So if they're being treated differently in the home, and I don't know if that treatment is good or bad, if it's PD or despair, I don't know what that difference is, but I do know that there's a level of differentness when you bring other children into the home, and sometimes you feel the burden of raising other people's children. Sometimes you feel a responsibility of raising other relatives' children. As a foster parent, sometimes you feel a responsibility to the community to raise children that have been neglected by their parents. And so when you have children like that, you have to make sure to give them an outlet to talk to you or someone about what's going on. Don't buy the notion that they are feeling fine, because they're not. And so if you I'm telling you this and you're observing this and you're saying, well, they just don't talk, or they're always in their room, or we never know what's going on, you're the one that's creating the narrative about what's going on in this child's life. Last time I talked about having a trauma-focused lens. When you're raising kids or children, when you are responsible for teaching and educating children, when you're responsible for providing mental health care, dental care to children, you have to realize that you come into the situation with your own trauma lens, and your own trauma lens can affect the way that you raise the children or even how you interact with them. So before you go off and tell anyone that this child is really different and you don't know why they're in your home, I need you to say that, what's going on with me? I really need you to do that. I really need you to check your trauma lens. Are you exhausted from work? And then as a teacher, as a teacher, and it's really funny to me because you get a classroom full of students that have these different type of daily traumas that they go through, daily challenges, and then you're responsible to try and teach them. And if you're responsible for trying to teach them, you have to teach them all in their differentness. And sometimes that can bring on compassion fatigue. Same thing with other caregivers. Compassion fatigue is real. And so looking at what are some self-care things that you can do for yourself, guardians, parents, teachers, clergymen, professionals, you all need ways of doing self-care, because when you listen to a child's life and you take on their trauma, you don't want to add to it by giving them your stuff or your junk. As I said, if I was sitting down with you and I had a relationship with you, it's your junk, it's your stuff. Giving it to the child does not help them with the behavior that you're trying to modify. So growing up where I grew up in an area where most of my peers and some of my relatives had parents that was addicted to a substance. As a child, I became keenly aware that kids who had parents that was addicted to a substance was gravely embarrassed and talked about. Because a lot of times those kids wore shoes until they were worn down. A lot of times you would see them in the same clothes all the time. A lot of times you would see their parents out on the corner or doing different things to get drugs. And so kids today go through the same thing. It was a huge difference having a parent that was incarcerated versus having a parent that's using drugs. When your parent is incarcerated, your parent is away. They don't have the in and out of coming in and out of your life at all times of the night, at all times of the day. You don't have the luxury of having your friends, and I'm calling it luxury, I'm using that lightly, but you don't have the benefit of having friends, schoolmates, enemies see your parent out on the corner, or even having one of your friends sell your parent drugs. All of that is going on with the kid, and they're experiencing this, they're witnessing this. And a lot of things develop. There's hatred that developed. There is sense of lack of self-confidence that developed. There's a sense of wanting to run away that's developed. There's a sense of wanting to be invisible that's developed. And typically, I do my videos by myself. It's fortunate that my mom is here today, because growing up, we had relatives live with us due to their parent being either on a substance or incarcerated. And to those relatives, it was the ones that I grew up with, it was like we grew up as siblings. And so I don't know what level of differentness, and I don't know what level it was from a parental perspective to have them in the home. But as a child, you felt this, as a child, I felt a keen connection or connectedness to my relatives. I've also had relatives that raised other relatives whose kids were, whose parent was addicted to substance. So throughout the thread of my family, we've always taken care of each other. Even when someone was on substance, we've always made an attempt to take care of each other. And so those can be some of the questions I'll ask at the end. Just what was it like raising children or providing guardianship and care to children when you're not the parent? And also a lot of times when guardians, non-foster parents are raising children, they don't receive subsidies from the state because, and I learned this when I was doing this type of work in California, and I fought for it, and I got the relatives benefits. They were saying that the family, it was actually a grandmother. Her child died of a drug overdose. So the grandmother, who was on a fixed income, because she had retired, she assumed custody of her 3 grandchildren. And so she was denied. And I found out why she was denied. And I was like, no, we ain't having this. So I went down to the state building in the city that I was in, and I asked them. And so the representative had the nerve to tell me, that's her grandchild. She'll want to raise them. And I said to her, well, she is retired and on a fixed income, and you're adding 2 more mouths to her life. The older child was a teenager and working, so I'm mainly counting the younger children. So I said, you're adding 2 more children to her life. So we'll come back, and she needs to have benefits. So I left. I went to the state's website, and I saw that they had this thing called Kin Gap. Kin Gap is a fund that's given to relatives that are raising members of the family. You are eligible for it if you are a sister, brother, aunt, uncle, cousin, nephew, because sometimes nephews and aunts are older than their nieces or whatever. So if you're any of those things, you are able to get this Kin Gap fund. The state of Missouri has a similar thing. I think it's a different name. I haven't gotten involved in it in Missouri as much as I was in California, but I do know that there is a fund that exists. The next type of fund is if you're a near relative, if you're a family friend. If you're a family friend that's raising a child who has a parent that's on substance, or raising a child, period, you are also eligible for funds. And so I just want you to be aware of that. If you're currently raising a child or children and you're a relative, go to the state website, whatever state you're in, and ask them what they have. If you cannot find it by searching on the websites, because sometimes it's a lot. And I know if you're looking in Missouri has too many pages that you have to go through. Call up to Jefferson City and ask them, what are you eligible for? You're also eligible for food stamps. You yourself may not be eligible, but the fact that you have the children in your home, they'll be eligible. And because you're the adult, you can pay for you would get the food stamps to pay for their food to add more to your household. Okay, so as a child, we're looking at what are some of the behaviors that a child goes through, and what are some of the diagnoses. The first diagnosis that's given to a child whose parent is addicted to a substance is bad, aloof, unmotivated. These are some unofficial diagnoses that the general public gives to children who has a parent that's addicted to a substance and that's in and out of their lives. That's a shame, because giving them that label doesn't help with the issue. It doesn't help at all. So one of the things we could do, if we start seeing some of those behaviors, recommend the child to, and I'll describe the behavior shortly, but recommend the child to the school counselor. Recommend the child for an IEP. Recommend the child to a parks and recreation, a sport, a mentorship program, the Boys and Girls Club. Look and see how you can get that child connected to an organization, friends, mentors, counseling, medication if that's necessary. But don't sit up there and say they're bad, they're a waste of time, they're just like their parent, especially when there's a negative connotation toward their parent with their parent using a substance. Be really careful of the labels that you give to your child. I don't think there's anything wrong with DSM diagnoses. I actually love them. They give you a framework of how to work and how to help your child. That is not a label. Calling your child stupid, dumb, and other names, those are labels that takes a lot longer to fix. So if you have a child, if you're raising a child, these are some of the behaviors you can look for. So there's a difference in gender. There's a typical stereotype that males are typically more aggressive. That's true to an extent. When you look at boys, like I discussed last time, boys have more acting out behaviors and girls have more acting in behaviors. Part of that acting in behavior is promiscuity. Boys are promiscuous as well, but they do it overtly. You know, if they're going out having sex with someone, they're going to tell everybody that they had sex with them. If they're going out having unprotected sex, they're going to go out and have unprotected sex. So if you're raising a child whose parents are addicted to a substance, one behavior you may see, especially as they enter into their teenage years, is a willingness of them to try the substance. Unfortunately, children who have parents that's addicted to a substance typically want to go out and try that substance. Another thing you can see is bullying other kids. Go to school, you push them down. You feel like they're going to reject you as a child. They feel like they're going to get rejected by their peers. So they start to reject their peers. They start to reject authorities. They don't have anyone that's teaching them how to respect authorities. They just have someone that's giving them a place to live. Teach your child how to respect authority and not just you. And authority does not mean the police officers, the firemen. No, authority is someone that's responsible for taking care of your child, like a teacher, for instance. That's an authority figure. They're with your child at least 8 hours a day. They're responsible for influencing them. Teach your child how to respect authority. If you are raising a child that has a parent that's on a substance and you're not in tune with it, you're going to miss training them or teaching them that they need to respect authority. And so as a result, they go in, they're fighting. They're saying, well, you're not my mama. You hear that? Even boys say that. I had a kid tell me, true story. Now, most of you guys, I talked about this last time. I was pretty aggressive and I got into a lot of fights. You can ask my mom. And like I said, I think if I did not go to a private school, I would have been in some of the classrooms that I teach in. They would have had me in a behavior classroom. I believe that wholeheartedly. And so I still have that in me. Like I still haven't learned how to not hit back. And so when one of my kids that I was working with, she was a foster child. She was removed because her parent used substance and her other parent was absent. And so I was in the process of about to leave. Like I was about to leave. And this kid, this child, this teenager picked up a globe and made an attempt to try and toss it at me. And I'm using tossing lightly. She was going to throw it at me. And it was all because I set boundaries in our relationship. She kicked the other staff person's car. Now I'm going in as a therapist. And she told me, why should I listen to you? You ain't my mama. I said, I understand. And so she kept going on and it was escalating. Now, I do not argue with kids. I don't encourage arguing with kids. It's futile. So I said what I said to her. And so she picked up this globe and threatened to throw it at me. And she said, you're not my mama. I don't have to listen to you. And my reflexive response was, because I'm not your mama, if you hit me and I get back up, I'm going to knock you out. And so,
okay, let me ask you this.
So I ended up telling on myself because I'll report it. My thing is, and I tell every child that I work with, I'm not going to teach you how to disrespect me. And if I feel it's disrespectful for you to hit me or make threats to hit me, I feel like I'm in imminent danger. And just because you're in a foster home or group home, I'm not going to let you think that it's okay to make those type of threats to the individuals that are raising you. And so I said what I said, and I went to the compliance department and I turned myself in. Same thing when a kid pulled a knife out on me. You know, I took self-defense, and I'm going to get back into it shortly. But he pulled the knife out on me, and he, as I took the knife away from him and pushed him out of my way, I tried to walk away because I thought that his foster dad and everyone had him. But he kicked me as I was going down the stairs. And so I turned around and I punched him on his leg that he kicked me in because I buckled as I was going down the stairs. And so he said, "You B, why'd you hit me?" And I said calmly, "I told you if you ever hit me, I'd hit you back." And so I went to the compliance. Well, I called my supervisor. I told her what happened. Then I went to the compliance department and I told them what happened. I called his social worker and I told him what happened. I went through the proper channels. So if at any time they wanted to do any type of disciplinary action toward me, I wanted them to know that this is what I did. This is the reason I did it. And so with the last place, and I think I mentioned this before, I went into the compliance office. They called me in because the kid was filing a CPS report against me. I was like, fine. So let me explain what this kid was. This kid he was being raised by his sister because both his mom and dad were addicted to a substance. And he was with his sister. He was leaving out the house. He broke her van windows. Now, his sister had 2 younger kids. This kid was 11 years old. He had individuals in her house. He broke out her windows. He would break in and out of her house. He was in a special day school for children with those type of behaviors. He wouldn't come home. He was smoking marijuana. So he was doing all of this. He even made attempts to run away to go to the other city where his dad was. And individuals couldn't understand why would he want to be homeless again with his dad. But that was his dad. He wanted to be with him. His sister was so much older than he was. There was like a 10 to 15 year age difference between him and his sister. So they never lived in the same house together because she got up and left. And she was trying to give her children a different experience. But he was giving her all type of problems. So he ended up going to foster care because when I first started working with him, he was with his sister. Throughout our working together, because his behavior was escalating and becoming really unsafe, they put him in foster care in a different county because they didn't want him affiliated with any of the individuals that he had become affiliated with in his current city. So when I went out there, things were going well up until that time, like we were making headway. But I told him that I had to terminate working with him because he lived so far out with the driving, and he was in a different county, and it was some billing issues. And so I told him I couldn't, and he was upset with that. And from that, he choked me. That's why I no longer wear name tags. I used to wear my name tag with a lanyard on it when I would go into homes, but he grabbed me by the lanyard and choked me. Again, I took self-defense. So it was one of these things, but he still had it. So whenever I go into neighborhoods now, I'll either have my badge either in my fanny pack, I have another bag, or I would wear I don't have the clip because it's just not pretty. But if I have to, I will wear that. So he's the reason why I don't wear lanyards anymore. But he did hit me. And so those were the things I did. But both of them were like, "You're not my mom. I don't have to listen to you." Of course I'm not your mom. And sometimes when a child says that to you, your natural reaction, if you haven't practiced it, is, "I know ain't your mom. Your mom on drugs." And that doesn't help the situation. I've heard parents say that. I've heard guardians say that. And it's just not true. So, like I said, growing up, having friends who had parents addicted to a substance and watching what they went through, as a friend, it's hard because they're always picked on. As an adult, as I look back on the relationships my friend had with their parents and some of the things that they had to do to maintain the household to try and avoid being bullied, I look back on that now and I think how sad it is, or how sad it was. And at the same time, I think how resilient they were. A lot of times on the end of it, we see resiliency, but in the middle of it, we see struggle, we see anger, we see disrespectfulness, we see untrained, we see all these things when a kid is going through it. But with the proper guidance and support, we can see how resilient they were. And we can see how just a pivot, just a little encouragement, just a little friendship, just a little something changed the trajectory of where they might have been. So I'm going to have a dialogue between my mom and I know she has a question that she wants to start off with, and then we'll go back and forth with what it was like and whatever else comes up. So what was your question?
Okay, why the state, like with the grandparents and the family member that's raising the kids, how could, why is it that people don't know that they can get funds? Why is it such a secret? That don't even make sense. Like, it's hard taking care of another child that's not yours if you don't have the finance and stuff. So the state know all of this. I have seen it where I could have someone kid and the person on drugs is still getting the check or food stamps or whatever. And, you can go and tell them, well, I have their child. And it's like, well, oh, well, so.
So that's a very important point. So that's 3 parts, actually. First, it's not a secret. The state does not hide the fact that they have funding for relatives that take care of their kids. They don't. The second part to that first answer is social workers don't know. Sometimes social workers don't take the liberty of reading to know that this is available. That's the first answer. The second answer, sometimes when family members are raising a child when their parent is on substance, they're still getting the benefits because they're still listed as the guardian. So 2 things. If a parent would have to give up, at that time, a parent would have had to give up guardianship so that they can turn all their funds over. There are different rights. You have parental rights, you have educational rights, you have legal rights, and there may be more, but these are the ones that I deal with the most when I work with grandparents or other family members. You want to have the educational rights because you want to be able to go to a school and enroll the child in a school. If not, the parent has to come up there to do it. But if you get educational rights, the other thing is health and medical. Like, you want to be able to take them to the doctor. And then the other one is the custody. So you have the different custodies. You have the physical custody, you have the legal custody. And so physical custody is they live with you, and legal custody is they may not live with you, but they live with someone else. And so those are the ones that I go through. Family members don't want to go through the process of getting the rights from the parents. Once you go through the foster care system, you're in the foster care system. So the state will take over and divvy up to the county that you're in and to the city that you're in, and then they will give it to you. So if you are a relative, you can do what's called a caregiver affidavit, and that is a letter. You could either type it into your Google search or Yahoo search or whatever search engine you use, type in caregiver affidavit. You can talk to the social worker. So you can call the state if you know the child's name, birthday, and mom's name, and so they won't necessarily give you a bunch of information, but you can call them and give them the scenario and say, this is what's happening. This kid lives with me. I want to do a caregiver affidavit because the parent isn't around. I had a grandparent. We did a caregiver affidavit for them. We did a caregiver affidavit because the mother was in jail, and she was a chronic, the mother was an alcoholic, and she was chronically arrested for different things. And so she would spend a huge chunk of her year in jail. And so the grandma needed to get into the school. The grandma needed to sign for his report cards. The grandma needed to do all those things that are involved with the educational process. So we had her, when she went to visit the child guardian, the guardian wrote up some information saying my mother, and listed her name and said she's going to be able to do it. We gave it to the social worker. We took it to the court. We went through this process so that the grandmother could get the benefits, because this mother was getting $900 worth of stamps and selling them to support her habit. Now, I don't encourage that at all, but this is the truth of the matter. This is what was going on. And so one of the things we had to do was go in and do the caregiver affidavit and make sure it happens. So I'm telling you this information because these are things that I've actually done. It may be different in your city and state, but the first thing you can do is start with the try. Try to contact someone from the state at a state level, give them the scenario, let them know. You can also let them know how long the child has been staying with you. And if the schools know that you've been taking a child from school, if the school has you listed, you can use that as proof that the individual was living, that the child has been living with you and you've been involved in their education. So those are things that you can do to start getting some of that benefits. As a relative, don't feel obligated or to take care of a relative, because it can lead to you feeling burdened. If you want to do it the right way, get the funding that you can get. You also can get support like therapy, homework help, school help, care, aftercare. Like you can get all of that stuff, but you have to make the phone call. If you need help, you can send it. And I'm thinking about charging. If you ask me too many questions, I'm going to bill you. That's just the truth of the matter. So you follow that, reach out to the state. So that was a good question.
Okay, let me ask you this. So if you was a counselor in a school, right, or you work at a school, you see, how do you detect if a kid is being neglected or not? So if you see a kid coming in, like it's cold, they don't have a coat, or if they have a coat, the coat is not zipped up. They don't, face not washed, don't have on good shoes and all of that. So where do the social workers or the teachers, you have some teacher would look at it and would jump right on it. But when you think that was a kid that's been neglected, would you look at it as a kid that's been neglected?
No, I wouldn't. But that's a good question. I'm going to tell you. So if a child is coming to school and his hair is dirty, he doesn't have on a coat, I would look at how long has this been going on. So if I'm looking at it and it's been going on for a week, 2 weeks, or a month, I would assume that something's going on with their home. And so you can do a wellness check. You can send for a wellness check. You can ask that the parents come into the school to talk to you, and you can put it under the guise of talking about what's going on with the child's behavior. You can also, and that's a way you can assess it. Now, you don't have to do this, but to answer my mom's question, that's something that you can do. You can have someone come in. If this has been going on, and I'm looking at the child, if they have siblings, I'm looking at their siblings. If they seem to be hoarding food, eating large portions of food, if they are, not dressed cleanly, if they seem to be sulking into themselves and not thriving in that environment, because that's what we're looking at. Grave neglect is looking at the fact that they're not thriving. So I would look at the fact that they're not thriving. As a mandated reporter, I can call in a report. I can call in to do a consultation, or I can call in to make the report. It's up to the individual who received the call to say if they want to take it or not. And once I make the report, I don't have to do anything else. There is nothing a teacher, a counselor, a school counselor, a clergyman, there is nothing that we have to do. We actually should not do anything once we submit the report. How we can support the child in the school, if we notice that a child is neglected, we can make an attempt to build a relationship with that child. Start talking to them. Teachers have something that therapists will never have, and sometimes it's envious. As a therapist, I cannot have a client and give them a coat. I cannot have a client and take them home with me. I cannot have a client and invite them to dinner. I do have clients where I take to the movies or I take out, but they earn it. Like, especially when I'm doing behavior work, they earn the right to go out, and I make sure they know that this is something you earn, and we set goals together. I have a kid that's currently working to earn check mix. I don't know, but it's check mix, and that's what you want to work for. And so we build up and we work toward goals. I've partnered with teachers, and teachers can give codes. Like, it's unethical for me to do any of that because it messes up the balance in the relationship. I've seen teachers take their students home. I've seen teachers bring their students to dinner with them. I've seen teachers do all these things. And that's, like I said, that's something that I'm envious of a little, because I do see clients. Like, I had this one client that I loved her, even so much. Because I had to go through the ethical process. I asked her social worker if I can still continue to have a relationship with her. And her social worker said yes. Like, we put everything in writing, and then I have to look at my ethical board. So my relationship with her wasn't a friendship. Like, we're not friends. After 2 years, based on my license, I'm able to have a friendship with the individuals that I've worked with, granted that I never provide therapy for them again. And so those are some of the things that can happen if you're a teacher and you're observing that some of your students appear to be neglected, which may happen if they have a parent that's addicted to a substance. That may absolutely be the case. You do not have to do the investigation on your own. You can submit the letter to, you can submit a call to the Child Protective Line. You can hotline them, as most people say. That's it. You're a mandated reporter. Everyone I just named, except the foster parents and the parent or guardian, you are a mandated reporter. And as a mandated reporter, you can report with no penalties. If you try and get involved and then do the investigation on your own, you're putting yourself at a risk and liability that's not helpful for you or anybody.
What's crazy, this just happened. All right. It was a student I was picking up, right? And like I was saying, he didn't have a coat, his face dirty, he had dreads, his dress was dirty. So this was out like in St. Peter's. I was picking him up. And so one day I picked him up. So the lady was white, so he called her his mom, so I didn't know if I found out he said his mom because the dad went with the lady, but he didn't have a coat. So I called my employer and I'm like, because I wanted to go buy him a coat, I wanted to give him some clothes, and they was like, no, we can't do that. And I understand that because it's not, you a therapist. I'm not a therapist. I was just picking them up, taking them to school.
So your employers were right, because that can be a liability that they have. And so one of the things in that capacity, if you're transporting kids to school, in that case, you become a mandated reporter, because you're work. And I know that it's your company, the company that you work for, they're the ones that have the relationship with the school. But as an employer and someone who is transporting a child from school to home, you are a mandated reporter. Individuals that work at Walgreens in the photo center, they're mandated reporters. If they see someone that brings in child porn, they have to report that. You can't just take pictures to Walgreens and think someone's going to develop it. No, this is the same type of thing. Just because you're not in an official capacity of working with kids directly all the time does not mean that you're not a mandated reporter, because you are. And so one of the things that could have happened, if you thought that were the case, you could have called CPS.
I did.
And do that, and your company cannot retaliate. And so you look at the laws in the state that you're in to make sure. But there is no, because when you look at the mandated reporting laws, you're protected, and you're also protected from retaliation. You're protected in case what the investigators find is untrue. You cannot be sued, and you should not be fired. And I had an instance where I had to make a CPS report when I was working at a company in California, and the COO tried to tell me that I couldn't file. And I had to politely, and I'm smiling because I don't know if he thought it was polite, but I said, you can't stop me from filing. Like, we can talk about what I'm going to say, which is why I came to you, but you cannot stop me from reporting. And because he knew that I said that, because he knew that I knew that, he didn't give much pushback. So if you want to file a report, it's good to consult with someone at your school, employer, someone else that's familiar with it, to help you with the language, to help prepare you, because not a lot of individuals have filed a CPS report, and there's so much negative connotation over filing a CPS report. You don't want to do it wrong. So in that case, or in those cases, make sure you consult with someone. But the bottom line, if you feel that this child has been neglected, abused, misused in any grave way, you have to report, because the flip side of that, if you are aware of abuse and neglect and you don't report it, you can be implicated. If anything happened, they will call you into question, ask you if you knew, how long you knew, and things like that. So your employers were right by saying, no, you can't get involved. If your employers tell you you cannot buy a coat or food for your clients, you cannot buy coats or food for your clients. What I find from 97% of Americans, and I made that statistic up, but 97% of the people I work with do not read the policies and procedures of the companies they work for. I was taught when I was about 21, when I got my first salary position, some lady, I don't even know her name. I don't know where I met her. I just don't know. But she told me, always read your policy and procedure. Always. From that day forward, I've read and I read it regularly, mostly so I can break the rules. But read your company's policy and procedure. And if they start to say anything, don't be afraid to write your company up. I know that you're at the risk of losing your job or whatever that is, but you have to write it up as a way of protecting yourself. Reading the policy and procedure, like whenever I write a letter, which I've written a lot of letters, not just for myself but for other people, I quote a policy or a procedure that matches the violation that's going on. Right?
Yeah, because what was strange, like when I called my employers, within a couple of hours, they took me right off the kid. Like they took me right off, and my heart was so broken because that kid loved for me to pick him up. Like when I picked him up, I have the games. He was, he played the games in the car, and he was just it just really, really broke my heart, and I hated, like, us, we Black, and we need lotion. We need, look, Black people, we know we need Vaseline, we need lotion. His ankle, his legs was like white because they were so ashy. Like he didn't have no type of Vaseline. I'm a Vaseline person. My grandkids, I grease them up and down. Look, we have to have Vaseline as Black people. We know we need it, so. And then even like with the dreads, they were so dirty, like, and I'm like, so the teachers, I know, I'm wondering why these teachers, but they was white teachers, I don't know if I can't say they care, they didn't care, but
So let me go back because we're about to wrap up in a second.
okay.
So the two important things you said was they removed you from that from the child, and that may have been also to save you. So if you write a report now, when I've written reports or file reports, before I do, if it's possible, I talk to the parent and the child to let them know that I'm about to file a report and why. Because I still want to maintain the relationship. It does not always work. And so if you're filing a report, there may be backlash from the individual that you're filing a report on. So there are times where they will remove you from that individual. It can seem like it's retaliatory. It may be. I'm not saying if it is or it isn't. I'm saying one reason to remove them is to allow them to have time to do the investigation or do what they need so that it's not interfering with your work and your productivity. So firing would definitely be retaliatory. Reassigning is a guise, like it's this underlining thing, so you don't know. To address the matter of caring, it's difficult to say if an individual care or doesn't care when they have a lack of awareness. When you're in different cultures, it's an unfortunate thing that being in a different culture, you sometimes don't know. And it doesn't mean that you are uncaring. It just means that you don't know what to look for. And yes, there are different needs between races. There are different needs between cultures within those races. Not all Black people have the same need. Not all white people have the same need. Not all Mexican people have the same need. Not all Asian people have the same need. Because within each of those races, there are cultures and subcultures. And so they just may not be aware. If it's not something that you do, you don't know to look for it. And, this is my mom. And as she was saying, I know this to be a fact. They wear Vaseline all the time. I have my 17-year-old nephew and I keep like hand lotion or Vaseline in the car. And he got in my car one morning and he's like, man, I don't feel good. I need some lotion for my face. And so I said, well, I got this. And he put it on and he rubbed it on his face and yeah, I look good now. I'm like, what? Your face all greasy and you said you look good? But that's a cultural thing. And it's not good, bad, and different. It's just what it is. And so to make individuals aware, that's one of the reasons why I'm doing these video series, because I want to make individuals aware. And next month, what I'm going to talk about is the effects of a child's behavior when they lose a sibling and the effects of a child's behavior when they lose a parent. So those are two separate things. It still involves death, but one is a sibling and one is a parent. And it's really interesting. When a parent loses a child, they only think they lost a child. They don't think that their kids lost a sibling. It's an interesting dynamic. And so that's what we're going to talk about next month. And I've gotten 3 requests to do a segment on incest within families. So that's something that I'm going to address either February or March. I will let you guys know as it come up, but definitely next month I'm addressing the issues, or I'm bringing to awareness the issues of the effects of a child's behavior when they have a parent that lost a sibling, or when a child loses a parent. Let me say that again so that I haven't confused anyone. The effects of a child's behavior when they lose a sibling, and the effects of a child's behavior when they lose a parent. And I'll just add this in, which I'm going to talk about more. The type of death matters also. So if you had a parent that died of natural causes versus an overdose versus an accident, that's different. If you have a sibling that died of natural causes versus overdose versus murder or suicide, like those are, it's a whole different thing. And so I'm going to address those and go over those. If you have any questions, you can hit me up. Again, I am Arkila Covington, licensed marriage and family therapist. I specialize in working with families and bringing to awareness mental health issues. Last night I was described as a specialist. I had not thought of that before, but I thought it was super cool. And my co-host for today, or my co-speaker today, is my mom, Stephanie Covington. You can.
Look, I'm just here. She the smart one, so I enjoyed everything. I learned a lot sitting here, so thank you, daughter.
Thank you, and we'll see you next month.